On July 15, 1789, looking for weapons to defend themselves against the king's soldiers, a revolutionary crowd attacked the fortress of the Bastille prison, a symbol of the king's authority. It rumored that people might be wrongfully imprisoned there, and that the prison might have a store of weapons. Waving whatever weapons they could, members of the crowd were heard shouting liberty, equality, and fraternity. The tennis court oath was an essential event during the first days of the French Revolution. The oath was a pledge signed by 576 of the 577 members from the Third Estate who were locked out of a meeting of the Estates General on the 14th of June, 1789. On the 17th of June, 1789, this group began to call themselves the National Assembly. On the morning of the 20th of June, the deputies were shocked to discover that the chamber door was locked and guarded by soldiers. Immediately fearing the worst, and anxious that the royal attack by King Louis XVI was about to happen, the deputies gathered together in a nearby indoor tennis court, where they took solemn collective oath, not to separate and to reassemble wherever the circumstances require, until the constitution of the kingdom is established. The deputies pledged not to stop the meetings until the constitution had been written, despite the royal prohibition. The oath was both a revolutionary act and an assertion that the political authority derived from their people and their representatives rather than the monarch himself. The solidarity forced Louis XVI to order the clergy and the nobility to join with the Third Estate in the National Assembly in order to give the illusion that he controlled the National Assembly. On the morning of the 14th of July, 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The crowd gathered outside around mid-morning, calling for the surrender of the prison, the removal of the guns, and the release of the arms and gunpowder. Two representatives of the crowd outside were invited into the fortress, and negotiations began, and another was admitted around noon with definite demands. The negotiations dragged on while the crowd grew and became impatient. The crowd surged into the undefended outer courtyard, and the chains on the drawbridge to the inner courtyard were cut. About this time gunfire began, though some stories state that the governor had a cannon fire into the crowd, killing several women, children, and men, turning the crowd into a mob. The crowd seemed to have felt it had been drawn into a trap, and the fighting became more violent and intense, while attempts by deputies to put in order but cease fire were ignored by the attackers. The three officers of the permanent Bastille garrison were also killed by the crowd. Surviving police reports detail their wounds and clothing. Two of the invalids of the stronghold were murdered, as well as all but two of the Swiss regulars. The division was protected by the French guards and eventually released to return to their contingent. The blame for the fall of the Bastille would rather appear to lie with the inertia of the commanders of the considerable force of the Royal Army troops encamped on the Champ de Mars, who made no effort to intervene with the nearby Hôtel des Invalides or the Bastille when they were attacked. The king was only informed of the storming the next morning by the Duke of La Rochefoucauld. "Is it a revolt?" asked Louis XVI. The Duke replied, "No, sire, it is a revolution. The population of Paris, expecting a counter-offensive, establishes the streets, built barricades of paving stones, and armed themselves as well as they could. Meanwhile, at Versailles, the Assembly remained ignorant of most of the Paris events." The king announced that he would return to Paris on the 17th of July, and he walked into the Hôtel de Ville and heard cries of "Long live the king" and "Long live the nation." The successful insurrection at Paris spread throughout France in accord with principles of popular sovereignty and with complete disregard for claims of royal authority. The people created a parallel structure of municipalities for civic government and armed force of civic protection. In rural areas, many went beyond this. Some burned title deeds and a small number of chateaux, as the Great Fear spread across the countryside during the weeks of the 20th of July to the 5th of August, with attacks on wealthy landlords impelled by the belief that the aristocracy was trying to put down the revolution. These past events led to the Great French Revolution, which shaped society today.